All right, guys, welcome back to the Func Med Nation podcast. It's my pleasure and privilege to talk to a mentor, or dare I say a friend, Dr. Ed Osburn. I'm going to give you his bio, and then he's got a hard stop at just about an hour. So we're going to jump right into it without much preamble. Number one ranked iTunes podcaster, best-selling author, and two-time Two Comma Club winner. Dr. Ed Osburn is one of the leading visionaries in the chiropractic industry. Through his Laptop Lifestyle Academy virtual podcast training course and Men of Iron Brotherhood, he offers a range of training for doctors who want to build massive movements and far-reaching impact while creating multiple 6- and 7-figure businesses. His philosophy is simple. Your practice can be anything you dream it to be, and your success does not have to come at the expense of your quality of life. And man, you're singing my song when you say that. So welcome. It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm pumped for this.
Yeah, very good. So you and I've known you now for a few years. I guess it's probably going on something like 4. Because I think I was living in South Carolina, when I first jumped on to your laptop. I can't get that phrase
I know,
out.
I can't even say it either, don't worry.
Laptop lifestyle program and training. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you in the context of the podcast and the community that we're speaking to is I've been online in some capacity for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself, even though I was doing online stuff, I was behind the curve because things had changed so rapidly. And I do remember a time, probably back around 2012, 2010, when being online meant you had a website, maybe a WordPress website, and it didn't have to be all that sophisticated. And people would just find you and, call your office and become your patients.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, dude, that's so not the case anymore. And so one of the conversations that I want to have, because I know we could have many different conversations in an hour, one of the ones I'd like to have is from your perspective, how much and how have things changed? And maybe we can preface that with how you got started in this, because like so many experts I've spoken to, necessity drives innovation, and you kind of had a crisis in your life. So if you don't mind, let's go back and do like the 3-minute Ed Osburn origin story. How'd you get into this whole thing?
Okay, so I'll say Edmonton. It was St. Albert, which is kind of like this bedroom community outside of Edmonton. If anyone knows Edmonton, Alberta, it's I call it the armpit of Canada. And everyone I know from Edmonton actually laughs when I say that. So I insult anyone, I'm sorry, but it's true. I had a great practice with my then spouse or wife. We had a pediatric practice. We built a very healthy practice. We were well known. Let's see, I was probably like 12 or 13 years in. And I thought I was a pretty healthy guy. I was running marathons to train for ultra marathons, doing CrossFit in between, seeing patients like very, very high volume. And I was so tired. I couldn't, I would train and then I had to literally crawl to the bathroom. I couldn't walk, and that would last for like 2 or 3 days until I'd feel better again. And then it, after test, I was like the subluxation, the definition of a subluxation doctor, right? So I put off going to a medic forever. Finally went in after probably 6 months of this. And they're just like, man, your iron is so low, like your hemoglobin, blood oxygen, we don't know what's going on. Like your blood, like I was borderline blood infusion. And it took about probably, like, long story short, it took about 6 months, another 6 months for them to figure it out. They just went one system at a time, heart, right, lungs, and they checked everything. And finally they just did a scope and they go, man, you have like one of the worst cases of Crohn's disease we've ever seen. They're like, it's like hamburger. And they like couldn't understand how I functioned, how I ran marathons like this, because it must have been going on for a long time. I was 39, 40 years old, I guess, when it happened, when I was diagnosed. Yeah. And once that happened, everything just spiraled and went downhill. So eventually 6 months later, I'm in surgery. I couldn't practice anymore. I'm sitting at home going, what the heck am I going to do? And I started listening to podcasts, and I'm like, man, I don't think these people are that great. I think I could do this. I know my ego, right? And so, yeah, I'm like, I don't know any real chiropractic podcasts. I think there was one out around the time. So I was kind of an innovator at that time. And then, yeah, so then I created the TCP, the Chiropractic Philanthropist podcast from my basement. And I just went hardcore, went all in. So content marketing, I had nothing to sell. And here I am. I mean, 7 years later, like crazy. Actually, no, it's more than that, like 8 years later. Here I am. Yeah.
So, this Func Med Nation is my second podcast now. And the first one, Inflammation Nation, which is, it's a healthcare consumer facing podcast. I launched just a little over a year ago, and that's done relatively well. And it's so hard to gauge success in a podcast, with stats and numbers and all that kind of stuff. And I got into that because of your influence and suggestion. And Melissa Longo, who I did an interview with Melissa a couple of weeks ago. And, she has her own origin story, of course. Yeah. And I was fortunate in the sense that when I did decide to do a podcast, there was some training available. Like, how did you figure it out? Because I can't imagine back at that point that there were a lot of people out there going, here's how you launch a successful podcast.
Well, I just did it the same as probably anyone else who might be listening to this right now. They think, okay, well, I can just do this on my own. I'll figure it out. So I did YouTube, I mean, there probably is enough information out there that you could put something together. The challenge is why try to just, cut and paste something together that's probably not going to be too successful when there's people who have gone before you, the innovators. And so John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire, I bought his course. I think it was called Podcast Paradise or something. Okay. That was a long time ago. If anyone knows John, he's an incredible guy, smart guy. And back then I did once I got a little bit of level of success, like just a little bit, a taste, I joined his Fire Nation Elite. There were like 10 of us paying him $300 a month. And it was so much money for me. And I'm like, wow. I got 5 minutes a month with John to get on a call. And so, I mean, I've always had mentors. I've always had people. I give credit to everyone who's gotten me to a certain level of success. And that's where what you have to do. You have to learn from others. And then you become someone who can not only teach, but someone who can innovate what they learn. Yeah. And that's really what I've done is I've just learned and then innovated. And now I just teach from experience, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good place to get to when you can just, because I think a lot of time when you're teaching from experience, it becomes really authentic, right? Because you're speaking from your heart, you're speaking from experience, and that's different than and I know that you have like, frameworks and curriculum and all that kind of stuff, but I do believe that when things are spontaneous and heartfelt because it's born out of the pain that you yourself have suffered and the victories that you had over the obstacles. I think it's just kind of takes on a whole different life and a different flavor. And it makes me wonder, Ed, when you started podcasting, and I understand the necessity of it at the time, what were you trying to accomplish? Because it doesn't, I might not be right on this, but it almost sounds like at the time, you didn't have anything to offer in the sense of, I can train you this way. I mean, you were a voice and you started talking and interviewing experts in the chiropractic profession. And here's just a little FYI for listeners. You don't work only with chiropractors. I mean, you work with business people of all different varieties and not just within the healthcare space. That's correct, right?
Absolutely correct. And however, the more people that I work, I'm very selective if it's not someone who's chiro or health related. Yeah. It's just, it is a whole, business is business, but marketing and messaging is a whole different ballgame when it comes to being a health professional, I believe. So, yeah.
So, okay. I understand. So when you first started podcasting, what was that initial vision? And at what point did you start to see, well, this is maybe a lot bigger than I had anticipated?
Well, I mean, again, truth be told, I mean, go listen to John's podcast. Our podcast flow is not unsimilar to John. Like it's
Mm,
basically Entrepreneur on Fire for chiropractors. So
gotcha.
I had a specific flow, and it was, again, you could tell that I had taken some training from John Lee Dumas, and my whole purpose was like, I'm sitting in my basement. I can't leave. I can't even lift my kid, right? Who's like 10 pounds at the time. And I was like basically in a diaper. Like, so I was like really like, I was like, how do when that happened, I lost completely a sense of who I was. And I lived and
Mm,
breathed chiropractic. So I
sure.
wanted to, yeah, that was the birthing of the philanthropist, isolation. And I'm like, there's got to be
Mm,
other chiros who feel isolated. And so when I came, I'm like, I want to just give back. So I called it the philanthropist. I was going to call it charity, the chiropractic charity or something. It was, and either way, it was a pretty bad name, but it worked. It was, it's
yeah.
memorable. So yeah, I just started, I came up with a flow. Back then we used Skype to record.
Yeah.
So I was using Skype and I was doing these calls, and I think I did 30 episodes before I launched. So a lot of content. I learned a lot. I They were bad. If you ever go
Mm,
back to those, we're over 400 in now. And I was just really felt blessed to be part of it. It gave me such a great appreciation for our profession and the
mm,
diversity, the dichotomy, like the eclecticness of our profession. I never had
yeah.
one conversation that was similar to any other in 400 conversations. It was really,
Yeah.
really brilliant. Yeah, I loved it. So it was just as much for me as it was for everyone else, but it turned into this piece of, again, we'll come back to that word, which is content marketing.
Yeah.
The creating of value with nothing to sell, like and a lot of people, especially doctors who are listening, see, they can't see how creating something like a podcast without having something like an offer, like say a call to action at the end to go buy my shit, sorry, go
Right.
buy my stuff,
You can say it.
and how that can benefit them, because we're all taught to measure ROI. Well, there's ROI that can come back to you in other ways, that will create monetary flow. And podcasting is definitely like I can't remember who said this, is it's basically the father of content marketing, but he said basically like you shouldn't be marketing if you're not content marketing. Like you shouldn't
Hmm.
even, if you don't have a content marketing strategy, you shouldn't even be marketing at all. Like you shouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that important.
So when my undergraduate degree before I became a chiropractor was in business and advertising, and I don't know if you
Yeah.
know this part of my story, but I worked for a couple of ad agencies in Toronto before I moved to the States to go back to school, and my account was Harvey's Hamburgers. Right? I was the junior account executive for Harvey's, which for our non-Canadian listeners is a big fast food chain in Canada.
Yeah.
And our agency really wanted to shift their advertising to kind of like the feel good fuzzy stuff that McDonald's was doing. And I
Right.
and I understand I'm saying these words in the context of functional medicine, right? And that's actually my crisis of conscience was one of the reasons why I left and became a chiropractor. But anyways, but the marketing director for the company, the national marketing director, everything to him was about, if we run this ad, how much money are we going to make that day, the next day,
Yeah.
the next week? And so everything was promotion, sale, new flavors, doing this. And everything was so short-term focused. We couldn't get him to see that there is value in pulling back and not selling anything other than the fact that you're a company that does something good.
Yeah.
And maybe that's debatable when we talk about fast food, but who doesn't love a good burger? And I think it's the same thing, because I had a similar struggle when I started working with you and really questioning whether or not what I was doing was worthwhile. And it took
Mm.
me a while to get out of the mindset of I need to sell something, sell something, sell something. And so not that I wanted this conversation to become about podcasting, but it's your start. It's the number one thing that I've done in the online space that's made a return, even though it's not like
Mm.
I didn't start podcasting because I wanted to attach it to an offer. I wanted to educate people in an era where do-it-yourself healthcare, people taking care of themselves, is becoming kind of a necessity because healthcare is so broken.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, in not selling people, it's become my number one source of new clients in my one-on-one coaching programs, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, the return came even though I wasn't expecting it. It took some time as well. So let me go back to the question, because I think we kind of took a little bit of a detour. It's all related, but when you started recording your podcast, I know that you were wanting to give back, but if you compare what you were doing then with what you're doing now in terms of coaching on the development of online businesses in such breadth and detail, right? You're not just like a one monolithic kind of guy. You do one thing. I mean, you coach in so many different ways.
Mhm.
How long did it take for you to start seeing, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to touch on all these different points? Like, when did the vision explode for you?
There was an intuitive piece to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was just the universe. I don't know. Like, I mean, now with what I know, right? Now that I do have formal marketing education, now I can see how I just kind of stumbled my way through it, but I never really had a clear objective. I didn't know. And then I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to teach everyone how to do what I did, right? Teach from experience. But now that I see it, I see, oh my gosh, like this, I just kind of stumbled into a strategy. So I think there was a little bit of intuitive to it. Like I'm just a natural marketer. So yes, when I was doing the podcast, what happened was I was kind of in that awareness phase of marketing. So people were learning about me. They had never known about me. I was guy in my basement. So that took like 3 to 6 months, just like talking to people, getting my voice out there, getting recognized, social media posting, just being relentless and ferocious in my marketing, not offering anything really. And then doctors, I was having these conversations and they were saying, you know what you should do? I would love to learn what you're doing, like how to start a podcast for my practice. And I'm like, boy, that would be a great idea. You should do that. And I mean, actually, if you go and listen to any podcasts now, or many of the podcasts, I'd say 8 out of 10, they've taken coaching, our program. Like if it's a chiropractic program or podcast out there, they've probably done our program. Yeah. If they're doing anything meaningful, for sure. So yeah, I'm like, maybe this is what I should do. I should teach people. So I created a course. And so it's
you did what a savvy marketer does, which is you listen to the marketplace and then you fill a need. Which is really
so I went from,
right?
It was really interesting too, because I shifted from awareness. See, this is what I think a lot of doctors don't understand is they have to test, they have to validate, they have to be out there and asking questions. And that's me. And I was doing it maybe unintentionally, but I was doing it. And my audience came to me and they said, hey, here's the problem I have. Can you solve it? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Then I moved into thought leader, which is like, okay, I'm an expert now. I have results. Here's my results. I'm going to teach a couple people how to do this. Did that. They got results. Then we went and it blew up. That was my first course. And I'm like, hey, now I'm just going to show other doctors how, because docs were coming to me saying, how do I create an online course and launch it? So then that's kind of the natural progression into teaching and coaching and online products and services, e-commerce. Yeah.
So there's two things that pop to my mind out of just that little snippet that you gave. The first one is describing for people listening this development or this progression from aware to awake.
Yeah.
Right. And I learned that with you when we did the training. Just kind of walk people through that, because most of the people listening, I would imagine, they don't have business backgrounds. They might not be natural marketers. This stuff doesn't come easy to them. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who would like to do this stuff themselves rather than just hiring someone and say, go do this for me, which I know that that's an option as well. But just like talk to me as I know nothing, and talk to me about how I view the potential marketplace or the marketplace that I might potentially want to interact with in terms of this concept of aware to awake and whatever stages might be in between. Why is that even important?
Well, I mean, if I kind of even back up, because I feel like, aware, awake, and well, it's unaware, awake. Hold on, how does it go? Unaware, awake, active. So like people who are
Active.
actually buyers. If we back up and just make it relevant to content marketing itself, which is
Yep.
brand awareness, then I would say that we're going more from unaware or awareness. So a lot of people will be in that phase, but they quit in that phase. And that's when you're just creating content and doing validation and testing to see what people want. If you even follow me of any, like, I don't want to date this podcast, anyone could be listening at any time, but I've been doing some awareness phase for a new podcast. I'm like putting things out there, hints, asking questions, and I'm getting some really great feedback, and we are executing on that. Then you'll move into what's called we'd say you progress, your brand maturation moves into like thought leader. So that's where you're creating content. Maybe you've been doing this for 3 months, 6 months, really connecting with your audience, not really offering anything, but value. And once people start seeing you as an expert, once people start seeing you as an authority and they're getting a ton of value, then you can move into what we call I would say is a storyteller. And a storyteller is someone who now you connect with people on a deeper level, because I like storyteller because people buy on emotion, right? There's so many people out there in online business, right? And once you move into storyteller, now you can make an offer and you can go, okay, look, we've connected. You understand me. I understand. You understand my story. I understand your story. Now let me give you a product story. So here's what I'm going to sell you, right? And I think that's where podcasting comes in or we could say video podcasting, or now it's like TikToks. And by the way, your Instagrams are great. And your reels and TikToks, they're amazing. They're awesome. But those are like little mini podcasts, little mini, pieces of content marketing, right? That establish you as a thought leader. I'd say that's where you are, right? And then there's probably some sort of storyteller coming. There's like some sort of offer that you would have, whether it's for B2C or maybe even B2B, right? Client or business to business.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was saying at the very beginning that things have changed so much. And this is one of the themes of this podcast, is just looking at the business of functional medicine, how much it's evolved. How necessary is it for anyone in the healthcare industry, any credential doing any type of work, to have some kind of online presence? And if it's necessary, why? And what are the different forms that it can take? Because I know you're big on, not everyone is going to do a podcast well, for example, right? So, everyone's got, you call it finding your superpower. So let's start with the necessity. Like, if somebody's not online doing something, are they missing out? What's the cost?
I think so. Like, I mean, there's two considerations. One is like, let's talk about the doc who's in brick and mortar. And they have to be doing some sort of marketing, unless they're just doing referral based, which is great. But even if you're just a one trick pony and your marketing you got one pillar of marketing, anything can happen. And we've learned this over the last few years. Anything can happen that is the unexpected that can completely turn that faucet off. Right. So I'm a big believer in having multiple pillars, at least 2 or 3. And again, I think that if you considered, or docs who are listening, consider that instead of thinking of like, I have a website, or I have a Facebook page or Instagram, and I got to create stuff for it. And think of it as digital real estate. Like you have to have a piece of digital real estate for people to land, people to learn, and people to come in. And it's getting more vital every day, like more and more vital, especially with all this AI that's being talked about.
And a whole new era right now.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy. It's like, I'm going to do a webinar on it next week. If you're not learning AI and how do you leverage that for your messaging and for education and for standard procedures in your office, then you're going to be behind. But if we were to look at docs who did have, like, we take it a step further and we go, look, what if I had digital real estate, but I had something that's an intermediary, which is a vertical scale of my efforts, where someone could invest in an online product, like an e-learning, a course, continuity or membership, one-on-one consulting, So something where people don't have to necessarily come in my office, but I can still get them results. And that's where I see, we have, the interesting thing is the people that I've worked with who are super successful, who are docs, right? They're all functional medicine
Yep.
docs. They're like
Really?
really, really successful. And these are people under the radar. Like if I said who they are, you'd never know who they are, but they're doing like incredible amount. They're helping an incredible number of people, and
Right.
they're earning like 6 figures a month online.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so in keeping with the tone of the question, like the different ways that you can do that, is that by monetizing a podcast? Is that selling a course? Is it doing challenges, paid memberships and communities? Like what does that success look like?
Well, again, if we stick it to the theme of functional medicine, I would say that, docs who are within this marketplace, most of them are doing some sort of content marketing, some paid advertising. There's a time and a place for that. And they're really running them to some sort of like to an educational landing page. So that would be either some sort of a challenge. So it could be I have docs who are doing a 5-day challenge, and then they're offering something at the end. And then I have docs who are doing live webinars. I know one doc who's doing an automated webinar, doing it really well. So there's an educational piece. And then from there, they put them into a conversation. So there's always a dialogue. So they don't sell them something right online. They put them into, hey, let's have a chat, right? And from there, they qualify whether or not they can help that person.
So is the whole point of doing something like a challenge, and they can be either free or paid, and there's pros and cons to each one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just another opportunity to educate without necessarily selling, but it's an opportunity to develop familiarity?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talk about the asleep, aware, awake, active. So that's the process we take people through. So if you think of someone who just learns about who you are and you want to take them quickly through that process, which is like a sales cycle, to becoming someone who invests and trusts and invests in you, a challenge makes it gives them an opportunity to do that very quickly. You could do that in 7 days, where if you were to do it in email marketing, it could take months, it could take a year before someone might open enough of those emails to buy, right? Listen to enough podcasts before they invest, watch enough videos. Yeah. So webinars typically will take them through that process a lot faster if you do it right. And challenges.
I remember, when webinars became a thing, evergreen webinars became a thing, and then evergreen webinars weren't no longer a thing, and now it seems like they're a thing again.
Yeah.
So like, what's up with the industry? Is this just the fickleness of the consumers and just like how they're paying attention? Because even in the last couple of years, you've had the rise of TikTok. You've gone from long form sales letters to video sales letters to now, originally it was, the very short Instagram videos and the TikTok, and now TikTok's expanded. And, I said to you at one point, TikTok's a freaking cesspool. I didn't want to be associated with it. And now it's like a legitimate business channel. And if you're not on it, you're missing potential conversations. So why is it you think that things change so quickly? And how aware does someone in the functional medicine space who wants to do online something, how do they keep their pulse on everything without kind of getting locked into, well, this is what I do, and while they have their nose to the grindstone, everything is around them is changing, so that eventually what they're doing isn't working, and now they don't know what to do because they haven't been paying attention?
Well, I would say start now. Like, do something now, learn something now, something that you don't know, right? I mean, if you don't know TikTok, go take a course, you can buy a mini course, go to YouTube, there's a lot of free resources. If you don't know Instagram Reels, you don't know how to set up your Instagram, and don't just feel that you're going to farm it out, because that's what a lot of docs, especially functional medicine docs, will do, is they just say, hey, I'm just going to hire someone to do it for me. But they never have a complete understanding of how that stuff works. So I encourage you to go learn. I mean, I mean, this is like evolution, expansion is learning. I mean, that's the purpose of life. So
Right.
I think we need to master new things. So I would say,
Yeah.
number one, start now. Number two is like, if you think it's accelerating fast now, wait another year. Like, you won't even know in a year whether you're talking to AI or whether you're having a conversation with a person. So what's going to be the commodity in the future, I feel, is humanism, like the human
Mm.
intelligence, right? That one
Wow.
factor that we can't replace. So, yeah, and it's already happening. I had this conversation with a high level online salesperson. He's like, salespeople are going to be replaced because AI have no feelings. They don't get their feelings
Mm.
hurt. They don't take it personally when someone says no. They are relentless, and they will just, and there will be AI that will be literally selling people their products online. And it's going to be the same when it comes to booking new patients for your practice. And it's going to be the same when it comes to giving recommendations. Like, people are already using open AI to ask for like to give them solutions to problems they have, just like
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah, I know you can go to OpenAI right now and say, what are the best supplements for Crohn's disease,
Yes.
and you'll get a list, and that list is an AI generated list that's derived from culling what's published in the literature. It's not just, hey, that person on that website say take this, and so that's what I'm going to put in the list. It is true artificial intelligence. I saw something, and I honestly, I didn't expect the conversation to go in this direction, but I'm kind of glad it is. And it fits with the theme of, oh my, how much has changed. I believe, and it was just a headline that flashed, and I didn't stop to read it, but it was something about AI passing a medical exam.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like, and at what point do we, as healthcare practitioners who curry in the commodities of education and information, I mean, you're right, it will be easy to replace us. And I think it's very forward thinking to see that the future commodity is going to be that human connection.
Yes, and it will be virtual, right?
Okay.
So medical doctors, I would be worried. GPs, right? I would be concerned about, whether I'm going to have a patient coming in
Yeah.
anymore. The beautiful thing about functional medicine, about chiropractors, anyone who's using a modality, or we use our hands, or we use different techniques to help people, I don't really see that as being a challenge. I mean, people will always need that.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, the intuitiveness of healing, right? The experience. But
Yep.
yeah, OpenAI is going to be, I mean, we could go there right now and say, hey, give me 10 topics for TikTok, that are the top trending in autoimmune disease or thyroid. And it'll give you
Right.
the titles. It'll tell you the ones. And then you could even say, well, write me a script for each, and it'll write you a script.
Yes.
But you do have to understand that you're talking to like a 7-year-old. So, although it's learning. And so you
Yep.
do have to take that into consideration as well. So you have to, I call it, put some humanism into it, or I don't even think that's a word, but you have to humanize it. So you have to make it your own still. But I feel it will be very different in a year. So one of the things, and back to content marketing, is like, I feel like a lot of doctors struggle with is like, what do I do? It's like, oh, I have to create something today. Now you can use OpenAI, and you can, I mean, the content, you could just ask it for content, and it'll give you ideas for, endless ideas, infinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
What's
I do understand that there's a disconnect, even though, I mean, when I read things that you've written, when I listen to you speak, I like there's a voice and a tone that you have.
Mm,
Now, I know that you can go to OpenAI and say, write a blog article in the voice of Matthew McConaughey with his humor that's a little sarcastic on
yeah.
this topic, and it will do that. And you're reading it and you're thinking, oh yeah, it sounds like Matthew McConaughey. Will do you think there'll be a point where I can interact with AI to the point where it learns my voice and my style? So that if I say write a blog article on this, it comes out in the way that I would write it. And I would have minimal edits to get it to the point where I want to push it out to a website, or give me a script that I can use to narrate, a podcast or something like that. Will we get to that point where it knows me and can duplicate me?
I think it already does. Like, so, if you've spent a good amount of time, and I've spent a lot of time using it, I've been using Jasper, if anyone's familiar with that. So that AI for probably almost 2 years. And then when when chat, like OpenAI came in, I just started playing with that too. But what it's done, I'll give you an example. So we have a client who, we're doing a full build, doing a massive launch. And one thing I don't do is copy. I'm just like, hey, we're going to do everything, but we don't do sales copies. Either you're going to write it or we're going to get someone to write it for you. The quote came back, it was like 12,000 US for the copywriting. It's a lot, like a lot of emails, a lot of follow-ups, like sales pages. And they're like, you know what? I'm not doing this. So I think I'll try and do it myself. And I always like jump in. I'm like, all right, I you know what? I'll do it for you. So I jumped in and I wrote it all through AI. And this isn't a it's not a profession, right? Or like a health profession.
Yeah.
However, like, for example, like writing a sales page, it was like, write me a caption for, and then the next question and the next question. So the more that I wrote, like I literally would spend 3 hours just writing in one stream. So it got smarter and smarter and knew more about what I was asking for and the tone.
Yeah.
And give me 3 quotes and give me a fact here and 3 benefits and give me the 3 reasons why someone wouldn't buy. And by the end, I had this, long conversation with OpenAI, and I was able to cut and paste in all of that into a sales page. And then we edited and humanized it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was actually really good. It was good.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. So to answer your question, the more that I like in that went on, I think I may have even gone like 3 days in that same thread. So it learned more about me and what I wanted and my voice. Yeah.
So I would imagine then the next time you go back to do that, you decide to jump in to do something you said you wouldn't do, that the AI would be more responsive, and what took 3 hours might take 1 hour.
I think it gets smarter every day. The more people use it. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's learning.
Yeah.
Pretty sure this is going to be, this will be the Terminator, right?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things when I first started working with you, and I don't know if this is applicable only if someone's not doing anything online or if they're doing stuff. One of the things that was very valuable to me was to sit back and to start thinking big picture in terms of what is it I'm trying to accomplish? How do I strategize this? What's the flow? What's the structure? So would you recommend that somebody just pulls the trigger and starts doing something, or is that wasted time and efforts if it's not aligned with, let's call it a purpose, right? And if it doesn't have some kind of a structure behind it? It's like, because you can do one, like you can plan and never pull the trigger, or you can pull the trigger without a plan, and both of those are problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everyone has to start with a mission, like a noble cause, a vision. Otherwise if it's not heart-centered and it's not something that's a passion, you'll probably give up because here, let's have this. I mean, let's say this, state it right now. I apologize because I did this years ago. And for every other marketer who said this is easy, because it ain't easy. Maybe it is easy, but it's not simple. Like, it takes time. And most people are not willing to be, punched in the face that many times and keep getting up. So it works, and it always works. Like, I don't know anyone who hasn't been relentless at this that did not eventually, become successful.
Sure.
So I would say, like, you have to have a mission. What is it? Why am I doing this? I think you need to look at your values. Like, what are my values? Like, do I value my time with my family? Do I want to be in my practice? Do I want to spend more time with one-on-one clients? And because once you know what your values are, then they're able to, like, my values are very high, like in terms of my time, but I'm an adventurer. I love traveling. I love getting in the mountains. I can't do that
Yes.
if I have 30 one-on-one clients.
Right.
So starting this month, I have like 3. And
Hmm.
all of our coaching, all of our group coaching is done by a head coach. And it's just, it's because of my values, right? And I think everyone should go through that process and not create a monster. So
Hmm.
that'll dictate whether you're going to create an online course, which is very, like, doesn't require a lot of your time, right? It's going to dictate whether you want to do group coaching or consulting, whether you want to do one-on-one high ticket consulting, or whether you want to have a continuity or a subscription model. You have to know what you value before you make that next step. I hope that answers your question. So look at your values.
Yeah,
And
no,
what
I think it does. Yeah, because each of those choices um, has a different mix of demands on your time and your resources,
absolutely. And
right?
learning.
You know, yeah, for sure. What are some of the obstacles when people, like you said, that a lot of people give up when they start posting online? And I have always been,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, a ready, fire, aim kind of person. I'll just, like, give me the general idea and I'll just go do something, and then I'll fail. And I know I'm going to fail, but I'm going to learn from that and I'll do it again and I'll keep learning until I get it right. I don't have a problem with that, but it is frustrating. Like when you post something, you start doing Instagram reels, and, like, I have a friend of mine he's up in New York, and his Instagram exploded. He went from like 200 and some odd followers
Wow.
to 350,000 in the span of just a few weeks. Right? This guy he just knocked it out of the park. And I'm looking at my numbers going, dang, like, what is wrong? And I'm like feeling like a failure. And so how do you tell people, is it just a matter of iteration and time? Or is there a point when you say, like, maybe you need to think of a different channel? Maybe that's not your superpower. Maybe you'd be better off doing podcasting than Instagram reels or blogging or something like that. And when do you say, maybe stop posting, let's backtrack and let's work on passion and strategy? Let's make sure we know what your message is and that you're clear on that. And then let's go back and let's revisit it. Like, how, as a coach, how do you sort all that stuff out so that you can effectively coach somebody through that first challenge of, crap, this isn't working?
Well, I mean, I say this all the time, and it's like, most of my time spent as a coach is mitigating expectations. Of our clients and our group, is everyone has the expectation of the unicorn, right?
Yeah.
Who goes viral overnight. So I would also just, say that, look, is it a failure or is it feedback? So I'm very transparent about my business, and I did a full 5-day challenge last week, and we didn't even come close to the numbers we wanted to see. Now, both in income, but also in our time we put in, and we want to help people, right? We want doctors to help, to be part of our group. And I had to sit back and I'm like, well, I could say this is a failure, but actually when I looked at it and the feedback that I could see, I'm like, oh, I know exactly why I made it. There were like 3 key things that I didn't do, which was kind of sloppy, really, if you think about it. And it's feedback. So I'll never make that mistake again. Like, I know how I grew my business, and I tried to bypass one. It was really one key thing. And I bypassed that. And also, my ads, I couldn't get my ads up in time and stuff like that. So there were little things, but it's feedback. But for someone like myself, I don't go, well, that didn't work, I'm never doing this again.
Right.
Yeah. And so to answer your question, I think at some point you have to have a little talk with yourself, like internal talk. And if you're like, look, truly, this isn't working, I'm not feeling it, and we need to try something new, then you try something new, because you're in that awareness phase, right? So he went from like awareness, testing, feeling shit out, to thought leader right away. Right. Now, some people get stalled out in thought leader and they never make the transition to storyteller. Like, they'll never make a sale from that. They'll never transition that into a profit. So that's just the next level. But
so what is the difference? If you can just take a second, what's the difference between a thought leader and a storyteller, and what's beyond? Because I always kind of thought like the term thought leader is almost like the pinnacle. That's the person to whom everyone else looks, but it seems like storyteller is a little bit more dynamic than that.
Well, a storyteller just is a salesperson. They have the sales acumen to make the sale. They are really great at sales. I was talking to a client, a one-on-one client this morning. He goes, I'm just crappy at sales. Well, you'll always be crappy at sales if you keep telling yourself that. But he's really, really like brilliant guy. Like he is an innovator at what he does and very well respected. And some people might even just say, to be surprised. So maybe they need to just do some work on the sales part, like the sales confidence, right? So I think being a storyteller just means, when I say storyteller, it's the ability to connect with people on an emotional level. So like empathetic emotional level, and to show that you can get them the results, the trust piece, right?
So is one of the differences there the fact that there is like you can be a thought leader, let's say that my Instagram reels went viral like my friends. That's great, but there's no interaction. And, maybe there's a comment that I respond to, but it's not like I'm doing a 5-day challenge or a live webinar where people can interact with me and spend more time other than the 90 seconds that they watch my reel on Instagram. So is that one of the main distinctions between a thought leader and a storyteller, is just simply the opportunity to make that connection, to understand the pain that someone is feeling so that you can offer them the solution?
Yeah, you can mobilize. So a storyteller can mobilize someone to do something,
Gotcha.
to change. Yeah. So that would be to click a button, buy my stuff. They have the courage to do that as well. I mean, I've had Instagram reels that are like 750,000 views shared, and reels created using my original audios, like thousands of them. But, at the end of the day, when I look at it, I'm like, well, has that ever turned into anything other? So that you would be considered like a thought leader. I mean, somewhat viral, but has that ever turned into anything of like a profitable conversation or even a sale? Probably not. So I don't spend my time on that stuff.
How much time does somebody have to invest in creating value without asking for a sale before asking for a sale actually becomes a logical next step? Like, is this something that you have to nurture an audience for a few weeks? I mean, I know we have some standard guidelines with things like email marketing. They have to have X number of emails before you're going to, typically they're going to be interested in buying. How is it? What's the time frame with the content marketing, giving value, free information, and then, okay, by the way, I've got this course, I've got this, like, what's that time frame?
I'd say 90 days, 3 months of consistent effort. Knowing though that you should also know what your offer will be. Like there in your mind, you're like, okay, this is what I think I'm going to do. But it may change, right?
Yeah.
Based on your audience and what the feedback they're giving you. But I would say 90 days. And that could be, creating a following on not just a podcast, but creating a following on Instagram, creating, priming your social media. So it's all cohesive. So it's all your branding on Facebook and your business page. I would like, if I gave a number though, of people who are really, really paying attention to what you're saying, I would say 300. So I've seen some really successful launches for higher ticket offers just in with 300 followers on Facebook.
Really? I guess a lot of that just depends on the problems that you're solving, right? Because, as I learned from you, more complicated problems demand more expensive solutions, right? So that, easier to get into the higher ticket stuff. So is it a circumstance, like, for example, and I'm thinking about I'm trying to get free coaching. Here's what I'm doing. So I've got 3 or 4 online courses that I've created, and I've sold a handful of those over the last year or so without kind of really even trying. So let's say someone has 4 e-learning courses that they could sell. Would it be an appropriate thing for them to break the year up into quarters, and each quarter they spend 90 days driving value in one topic of one of those courses. Let's say it's detoxification. And
Right.
so they spend 90 days talking about detox consistently in all of their social media channels and their podcast. And at the end of 90 days, they say, by the way, I've got a course. And now we're into quarter two, and now it's thyroid. And so I spend next quarter talking everything thyroid. And at the end of that quarter, guess what? I have a thyroid course. I mean, it kind of, is that a
Yeah, we could
reasonable
do it
way
that
to
way.
do it?
Yeah. So
Obviously
basically
many different ways.
yeah, there's like little pilot launches almost. So you launch something, onboard people into the course. You stay a couple of weeks ahead of them creating content for say 3 months. Could be less, could be 60 days, could be 90 days, or sorry, 30 days. And then yeah, you have a packaged course at the end. Now here, I'll just say this as well. You know, the enemy of production and income is good ideas. So how many of us get distracted with shiny object syndrome, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to go chase this and that. So long as you're not creating new courses to keep yourself in production mode versus sales, avoiding sales mode, then I would say, yeah, more power to you. Keep going. But I have yet to meet, and this is a massive realization I've had this year, especially with working with so many docs. I've yet to meet anyone who has been able to replace their income or really substantially augment their income doing e-course sales. And yeah, I mean, that not just specific to our profession, like at all. So yeah, e-courses tend to be, I would look at them as a front end offer, a way for people to get some experience with you, learn, like get some results. But they always have to lead to either like a monthly recurring revenue model or to a coaching experience that's a higher ticket.
Whether that's a group or one-on-one.
Yeah, because otherwise you get stuck in eventually what happens is you will get stuck in the advertising wheel of spending money. That's not making you, that's spending $1 to make $1. And I know people like who have made incredible courses, made $1 million last year, selling e-courses for $60, $100. And then at the end of the year, they're just like, I'm done. But if they had taken those 1,000 people who purchased initially, said, yes, raised their hand, I want this, and turned them into a continuity model, a monthly $100 every month from each one of those people, their business would look very different.
Yeah. So in that sense, you really, you look at these courses as a feeder into other things, which to me says, number one, if you develop a course, it has to be pretty simple, right? You easily overwhelm people. Now you always, I think with content like that, you want to over deliver, but you don't want to overcomplicate, and you want to give enough value that people said, okay, that's enough. That was well worth the money that I spent. But in some ways, your content maybe should raise more questions than it answers, because there's always another question to ask. There's always another avenue to explore. Do you feel like everybody in the functional medicine space needs to have a course, at least one? Or is this just kind of another thing? Like maybe it's not your superpower. So maybe I shouldn't be doing courses. Maybe I should be doing something else. And I don't want to be distracted by doing courses because somebody else says, well, if you don't have a course, you're not doing it right.
I think you'd be remiss not to have an online, like an e-commerce store. I mean, let me back up again here. So the e-courses can definitely be a upfront offer. So a way for people to take a course that leads to something else. So I would say, again, maybe I love examples. So intermittent fasting, someone takes this course, it's 60 days, they lose 10 pounds, their blood glucose levels out, they're no longer pre-diabetic. Now they're like, great, I did it. Now what? So you create a new problem for them essentially, which is like, how do I sustain this? And most people, if you frame them, and this is just the truth, if you frame them over, 30 or 60 days that they can't do this alone, they've tried to do it alone, probably. So that's where your continuity can come in, and you can go, look, we're going to support you for the next year and make sure that these results sustain themselves. And that's where I've seen a lot of docs have been successful doing a model like that.
Right.
Yeah. So it leads to something. It's instead of a front end, well, it's a front end offer, or it's part of, say, if you were doing group coaching and someone signed up and they're investing a much higher level, and maybe they're working with you for 6 months, but they have 60 days of curriculum to go through. That's really an online course. So I've seen doctors do that, and that seems to be really successful as well. So almost like a 60 days of indoctrination and results.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And it's also back to that. You're developing your authority. People are getting used to you.
Yeah.
I have to tell you this. I had a new client reach out to me, a few weeks ago, and she contacted me through a form I have on my website. And so I texted her immediately and said, "Hey, this is Dr. Noseworthy. I got your email. I'm in the middle of a whole bunch of things, but let me know what you need and I'll get right back to you." And she texted me immediately and said, "Is this actually Dr. Noseworthy?" And
Yes.
then I laughed out loud because she said, "Excuse me while I have a fangirl moment," because she'd been listening to my podcast and I was laughing. I was like telling my wife, like, "Hey, look at this. This is really funny." But so I mean, I've seen all these things in action, which, of course, then reinforces the fact that you must be doing something right. I know we're probably getting close to the time when you need to hop off.
Well,
But
my doc actually just messaged she's not feeling well. So I got
so
a
we have
couple,
a little more
I got a
time.
few extra minutes. So don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's ask the question, like, what's the first thing if somebody has been sitting back, they're in the functional medicine space and they're thinking, I need to do something online. There's so many options these days, right? It's not just, hey, you can build a website. It's all the different social media channels. Let's not even talk about the whole AI thing, which is probably the shiniest of all the shiny objects to be distracted by. But eventually a necessity. I understand that. So how would you tell someone to get started? Like, how do you say, okay, do you tell them pick one channel, get on all channels? Don't do anything until you get your passion and your you call it your holy cause, your mission settle. Like, what is step number one?
Well, I'd say step number one is do some research. So if you're thinking of launching a podcast, go listen like it, but you don't listen to podcasts. We should probably go listen to some, right?
Sure.
See, look who's doing it successfully, right? Success leaves clues. Start watching, some like Dr. Jockers, I think, is out there. Like, I mean, he started as a content marketing, and now look at where he is.
Yeah.
So I would say do some research, kind of see what kind of resonates for you. How could you make your, this unique for you, your USP, right? Like what makes you unique and how you could create something. And yeah, you do need to have a mission. Like I would come up with a mission. Like I know what my mission is this year. Like I am, 100 doctors. Before I jumped on this, I messaged a doc. I'm like, we are on a mission to help 100 docs this year. I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes. And know exactly what your mission is. It can shift a little bit maybe as you're learning.
Right.
But I think you have to start there. Those would be the first things I'd say to start with. Content marketing is easy, I think, for docs though.
Why is that? Why do you think that is? Just the endless topics that you can talk about?
Well, you may not like this answer, but I think it's your ego. Not you, but specifically, I'm saying to anyone listening, I think it's doctors' egos, because we know a lot, right? And we want to tell people, and we want to help people. And so when it comes to doing a podcast, whether you're interviewed or you're interviewing or, someone else, or you want to write something about your, that's expertise or results you've had in your practice, like we know more than the typical Joe, I would say. And we're the upper echelon of education. So, I think content marketing is really easy for docs. It's just, they get stuck in it. It's like the dopamine rush of like, oh, I got 150 people liked my TikTok, but they forget to go to the next step. Right. So
they get stuck in that cycle of just content and,
and
you
then
never
2 years later, they're like,
where
I'm not making any money doing this. Well,
I'm burnt out. Yeah. Yeah. So what about educational learning and coaching opportunities that you provide that anybody listening might want to avail themselves? I know that you've gone through a big restructuring in the last couple of years. So,
Last year,
at one point, laptop lifestyle, and then you had online empire, and you've done a whole bunch of different things. So kind of cone it down to, what is Ed doing these days, and how can someone get started if they want to start learning from you specifically?
Yeah. So, well, I'll start with the podcast. So thechiropracticphilanthropist.com, right? So you can go check it out. I mean, our site was having some challenges this morning, but it should be good now. That podcast, actually, I've handed it off to a new host. So we have a new host coming in, and I'm creating a new podcast called Bold Conversations. So if anyone wants to go and look that up, it'll be out in about 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. So I'm excited. It's time to burn some ships and move on.
There you go.
So that's step one: learn, research, learn a little more. You can head over to Dr. Ed Osburn, osburn.com. And we have basically a landing page. You can learn more and even set up a time and just schedule a time to talk. But we basically have 2 ways that we help docs now. So one is done with you. So we give them, we have well over 450 hours of online content now, or learning content. Right. We've really streamlined, systemized the program. We took 12 months to go through our system and see how's the best way we can support our members. And we really pulled back last year to really focus on 2 things our members were asking for: accountability and, I guess you could say a direction. They wanted to know where stuff, even though we had all this content, they didn't know where to get it and where to find it. Yeah. Because we have so much. It's a black abyss. And that's when we brought Jay in, because Coach Jay Warren, I think he's the first graduate of our program ever. Highly successful when it comes to his content marketing. So his podcast is one of the highest downloaded in pediatrics today. Yeah. And he's got an incredible program. It's very high ticket that he sells. And by the way, it took him 2 or 3 tries before he found it. And so now he's coaching from his place of experience, but also he's using all of our systems and tools. So that's the one place that we work with docs. It's basically like a year program. And then we have another way that we work with docs, which is people who come in that are already pretty successful. They've had sales. Maybe they're in the 10 to 30,000 a month range. We're actually doing full builds and strategy for them to get them to the six figure a month range. So that's our UFW social marketing. And we have a number of clients who have come on board on that.
So what does full build mean, so that everyone understands that?
Well, so most people don't once a doc gets to, they'll usually hit a ceiling between the 10 and 30 range. And at that point, they need to start scaling out by getting, some ads up, start reinvesting back in the business. They need to have a real clear customer journey. So what we do is we set up all of the email sequences for them, all the nurturing. We look at their coaching systems. We do a full social media audit. We look at all brand cohesiveness. We create all of their branding for them, or recreate it if we have to. We put everything into their e-learning library. So we create an academy for them, sales page, web page, you name it, we do it. And we spend about a year working with those docs to get them to the next level. And those are the docs who, again, it's not for a doc who's coming in going, what should I do? These are people who have already validated that they have sales. People are raising their hands saying yes, and they're ready to just blow it up. And gotcha. So it's pretty cool working with those docs too. Yeah.
All right. Final question. What does, I think I know, because I've seen all the posts of you skiing up in the mountains. What does Ed Osburn do in his spare time?
In my spare time? Well, if I'm not with my kids, because that's also something that's changed over the last year. It's interesting being a 50% dad, full-time dad, but 50% parent, and then running a full-time business. Yeah. I love skiing, man. I skied when I was a kid, loved it when I was a kid, did it forever. And then I hadn't skied in probably 20 years. And I got back into it February last year. So I'm 53, double black diamonds, dropping off bowls. Yeah. I'm going to Sunshine, Banff, Rockies. If anyone can come out here, I'll give you a tour. It's amazing. It's just God's country. So
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
love
Well,
it.
I might
Yeah.
argue. I think Newfoundland is God's country, but
I haven't got out there. Although I have an
yeah,
RV, right? So I might
that's
get out
right.
there this
Yes.
year.
Yeah. It obviously it's a completely different flavor than out in the Rockies. Have you ever been to Ireland?
No, no.
Well, if you've seen pictures of the Irish coast, Newfoundland is like that. It's called the Rock for a reason. It's just nothing but rock.
Yeah.
But it's just rugged, and it's just rugged and beautiful in a different way than the mountains are. Although there are some mountains there, they're smaller mountains, but they're still mountains. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, that Kathy and I are on the road all the time, in the RV, and if we're ever up in your area, I told you once, I'm going to knock on your door,
Yes.
and maybe we can meet and go tour the mountains for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I have a B class RV. It's got the laptop lifestyle all written all over it on the
Yeah.
wrap, and I drive that thing around all summer. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's very cool. Well, listen, I would love to invite you back at any time. There's so much more to talk about in terms
yeah,
of the online space and how things are changing. And we could probably have a talk in 6 months and things would be different at that point.
absolutely.
Especially, yeah, with how fast it is doing. But I appreciate your time and your insights today. And I have to say, just a little personal testimonial. I coached with you at a time where I was so confused about what to do and why I was doing it, that you gave me a lot of clarity. And I know that's one of the things that you teach, is that before you can connect with people, you have to have the clarity in your own mind about who you are, what your passion is, what your message is, and ultimately what you can do to help people solve the problems that they're facing every single day. And that was tremendously helpful. So I can't recommend your services, your coaching more highly than that. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
All right. My pleasure.